Hello there everyone, it's Robin the Delta Crafter and I want to thank you for joining me for an extra special video on my YouTube channel. Today's video is a part of the Card Crafters Collaborative. This is a quarterly collaboration that I host on YouTube where some of my crafty friends come together around a central theme. This time we're bringing you all the Hello Summer vibes. You'll be able to find links to all of the participants' videos in the description box below, so make sure you check them out. I really enjoyed doing these collaborations with my crafty friends, and I'm very thankful that they have joined me for this Hello Summer collaboration. Let's go ahead and take a look at the products I'll be using for my project. I'll be using the 1 in a Melon stamp and die set from Rabbit Hole Designs. I'm also going to be using some nested A2 arches dies from scrapbook.com. Because this is a coloring image, of course I'm going to break out my Copic markers. All the colors that I'll be using will be listed during the video. We'll be using several colors of distress ink, including Salvaged Patina, Tumbled Glass, and Salty Ocean. There's a couple more we'll be using, including tea dye and antique linen. When you know you're going to be Copic coloring, you need to use a Copic friendly ink like this Intense Black from Hero Arts. And of course we're going to need some blending brushes for our distress inks. Let's go ahead and get started making this project. So whenever I'm doing projects like this, I like to think through my steps and think through the things that I need to do first, such as things that will need some time to dry. So because this Hero Arts Intense Black ink, which is my Copic friendly ink, is a pigment ink, it needs a lot more time to dry than a dye ink would. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp my image first. And I'm actually going to stamp it twice because whenever I'm doing Copic coloring, because I'm new to Copic coloring right now, and probably this will be my process forever, I like to stamp my images twice, so that I can have two images to color, and then when I'm done coloring, I can choose which one I like the best. So I stamped my image twice and then turned the paper around and stamped it again. So now that my image is stamped, that ink is still wet. So I'm going to bring in my heat tool and hit the images with my heat tool to kind of speed up and assist in the drying time. Otherwise, these images would probably have to sit for over an hour and if I just left them to air dry. So while those are set aside and drying, I'm going to come in and we're going to create our ink blended background. Now, if you know me, if you've been around my channel for a while, you know that ink blending is my jam. And I just couldn't do this project without having some ink blending on here. So we're going to be creating a beach scene. So we're going to have some water and we're going to have some beach. So I'm going to bring in that Salvaged Patina first. And if you notice, I'm kind of creating a little wave, if you will, or a little divot to kind of give you the idea of some motion in the water. So I've laid down a good layer of that Salvaged Patina. Then I move to Tumbled Glass. Then I'm just going to put a tiny bit of that Salty Ocean at the top in order to kind of give an idea of depth. Then I came in with the antique linen and now just a touch of that tea dye. And if you notice, I've left a little bit of white space. That's kind of giving us the illusion of the white foam that the ocean creates as the ocean waves go in and out. Okay, now it's time for us to start coloring our images. They've had some time to dry and I did hit them with that heat tool, so they should be ready for coloring. So whenever I'm coloring images, I just choose a spot to start and I go from there. While I'm coloring the images, there'll be some summery music playing in the background and all the markers I'm using will be listed on the screen. This image is really making me feel all the summer vibes. Let's take a closer look at the finished product. So now that we've got our images colored, now it's time to move on to assembling the card. So we're going to be using two top folded A2 size card bases. The first one we're going to cut a window into. And so that's where we're going to use these nested A2 arches. So you may have to go through and just through a couple of sizes and figure out which size works best for you. I'm going to use a little bit smaller die than the one I initially started with. And I'm going to tape that down onto my card base using some mint tape. That's going to hold that die in place as I run that die through my die cutting machine. Because I only want the window on the front of my card base, I'm going to open the card base and run it through the die cutting machine that way. So now I only have a window on the very front of my card. So now it's time to bring in that second card base, which we're actually going to have fold to the bottom. So we're going to put these two card bases together, and this is going to turn out to be a trifold card with a window. But in order to make sure that our cards fit together nicely, you do need to cut off just a sliver of the inside portion of your back card. That's going to make sure that there's not a lot of bunching up of the paper at the top. So you can see there, I kind of just demonstrated how the two cards are going to come together. So there's going to be, the two back panels are going to be glued together. And I'm going to use some tape runner for my, to help my cards stick together. You can use whatever adhesive you have on hand, but I'm going to encourage you to use a strong adhesive because this card is going to end up having some weight to it, and you want to make sure that those two cards stay together. Those two card bases, rather, stay together. So I like to turn my card bases on their side and kind of line them up that way and press them down. Because I use tape runner, this is not like a liquid adhesive where you have some forgiveness. So when you use tape runner, you got to kind of make sure that you get it right the first time. So now that our two card bases are adhered together, we can move on to kind of laying out how we want our card to be put together. So that background that we created earlier, we're going to use that on the inside flap of the trifold card. And that's going to create our scene. So I'm going to adhere that to my card base with the same adhesive tape runner that I used earlier. I'm just going to use that and stick that to the card base. Make sure you get a good amount of adhesive on your panel, your inked up panel. You're going to want to kind of eyeball making sure that you have a decent white border around your inked up panel. Because, by the way, I did trim this down a little bit. So now that inked up panel, which started out as 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so typical A2 size, I did trim it down to 4 by 5 1/4. So now I'm kind of giving a dry fit for our image, which was die cut using those coordinating dies, as well as the sentiment, which I stamped and cut while I was die cutting the image earlier. So I'm kind of eyeballing and figuring out where I want everything. Do I want it to the side a little bit or smack dab in the middle? And I think in the middle is where this is going to work best. I decided I wanted a little bit of shimmer on my drink, so I pulled out my Spectrum Noir sparkle pen and added some shimmer to the beverage. And now that that has an added touch of sparkle, it's time to secure the image to the outside window of the card. So you can see there's just a few spaces where where the image actually can be secured to the card. So I'm going to use my Artiste glue to add some liquid adhesive to the spots where the image touches the card base. Just as I was adding this adhesive, I was remembering that I needed to do one more step. I needed to cut just a plain white die cut out and secure that to the back of my colored die cut so that the coloring doesn't show through when I open the window. So we're going to give this a little bit of time to dry under the weight of an acrylic block, and we're going to move on to adhering our sentiment. This is a sentiment that comes in the stamp set, and I went ahead and popped it up with some foam tape. This is, I think, a 1/4 inch foam tape from scrapbook.com. And all of the products that I use will be listed and linked below in the description box for you. We're going to go ahead and secure our image to the card base by applying some of this liquid glue to the spaces and places that the image overlapped with the card base. So just put a touch of glue on there. That's the new Artis glue from scrapbook.com. And I'm going to secure that image to that card base, making sure not to impede the open window. I'm going to place the acrylic block on there again, apply some weight. Then we're going to add our sentiment by peeling off the backer tape and adding it to our ink blended panel using our reverse tweezers. These really help be able to get your sentiment or whatever small thing you're working with in the exact place that you want it. And with that, this card is complete. Let's take a closer look at this card as well as another card that I created with a slight variation. You can catch a good glimpse of that shimmer and shine as I bring this card closer to the camera. I really love the way that lime came together as well, because lime is not, so the pulp of the lime is clear on a real lime, and I think using that colorless blender really allowed that to be seen. And here's the card fully open with a space on the inside where you can write a personal message to your recipient. So here's the other card that I made, and I changed it up a little bit by using a square for the window instead of an arch, and by adding a piece of acetate to the window. I want to thank you all for joining me for this video on my YouTube channel today. If you have enjoyed it, please consider giving the video a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. I hope you all take a moment to visit all of the other crafters who are participating in this collaboration. Links to their videos are in the description box below. As always, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at The Delta Crafter, as well as on my website, thedeltacrafter.com. Until next time, everyone, enjoy!